New offensive coordinator Thomas Brown made some subtle but hugely important changes to the Chicago Bears offense that helped bring out the best of Caleb Williams against the Green Bay Packers.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started with America's #1 sportsbook. On the show today, we dive a little bit deeper into how this Bears offense looked different against the Green Bay Packers and what effect that had on Caleb Williams and company to get them scoring 19 points and putting the team in position to attempt a game-winning field goal at the very end. We'll go deeper on the pre-snap motion and the direct effects that had on the offense to get just an easier, cleaner picture for Caleb Williams working under center. We'll also look at formationally some things that he did different here and how that then ties in with what Caleb Williams is doing under center after the snap to build a more structured, cohesive offensive system there. And then we can take that a step further and look at how these changes also then help your injured offensive line to give Caleb Williams more time and help that group play better against Green Bay than we had seen them play overall in the last handful of weeks here. Now, it's important to keep in mind when Thomas Brown takes over as offensive coordinator on, Tuesday? He's got 4 or 5 days to try and implement changes into this offense. That's not enough time to install a new playbook or a bunch of new plays or change the terminology or try and reinvent what this Chicago Bears offense is going to look like. But it is enough time to take the things that they're doing and tweak them a little bit and say, hey, on this play that we've been running, how about instead of doing this, you actually just do that instead. And we change it a little bit in this way or a little bit in that way, and then see, Caleb, if we change it like that, then you can go in this order. And it's the little tweaks along the way that end up opening things up more and start to stack successes together in this Bears offense. One of the big areas we can point to right away was that Thomas Brown went to more pre-snap motion than Shane Waldron had been using in this offense. It's not as though that Shane Waldron never put players in motion pre-snap or was running an abnormally low amount of pre-snap motion, but it was something they went a step higher on with Caleb Williams to try and help him be more comfortable in this offense. If you look at specifically this game against the Green Bay Packers, it was the most pre-snap motion the Chicago Bears had used in any game so far this season. A season high in Caleb Williams' pass attempts with pre-snap motion. A season high in Caleb Williams' number of completions on plays with pre-snap motions. And I think the more specific area you can see the impact is that on passing plays where they sent a player in motion before the snap, Caleb Williams' average time to throw against the Packers was under 2 seconds. And on plays with pre-snap motion, he threw to his first read on 90% of those plays. It allowed him to see more of what the defense was doing pre-snap so that he could make a quicker decision post-snap and get the ball in the hands of his playmakers. That's the big difference of Thomas Brown opening things up more with that pre-snap motion. Because what pre-snap motion allows Caleb Williams to do is see how the defense is going to respond. When you send a receiver or even a tight end across the formation from one side to the other, right away, you'll be able to tell, does the same player follow that receiver all the way across the field? That indicates potential man coverage. Or does every player kind of shift and they kind of pass him off as the player moves across the formation, indicating that they're going to be in zone coverage? So then based on that indicator, Caleb Williams can say, okay, pre-snap, it looks like they're showing zone coverage. Okay, and pre-snap, there is one deep safety back there. So if I know it's probably zone coverage and probably a one deep safety, that tells me then it's most likely going to be, say, a cover 3 coverage in this example. So that when Caleb Williams takes the snap, he's not going to just fully assume that it's cover 3, but he's going to look and confirm whether it's cover 3, and giving him some of the answers to the test before he snaps the ball can make that confirmation process post-snap quicker, easier, and more natural for Caleb. That sometimes post-snap, okay, then they'll rotate their safeties and it'll be a different coverage than you thought they would. And sometimes teams will show zone and not follow somebody in coverage and then end up just passing off who is in man-to-man coverage. Like, you can disguise against pre-snap motion, but not every team does that on every play. And a lot of times it can give you the answers. And it seemed like in this game against the Packers in particular, it gave Caleb Williams the answers because he could send the guy in motion, have a much better sense of what the coverage is, make a quicker first read, and make that throw or get on to the next read or whatever it's going to be, and get rid of the ball out of his hands more quickly. It can also, the pre-snap motion can also help identify blitzing as well, right? If there's a player who's supposed to blitz on one, if there's a cornerback who's going to blitz, but he's lined up over a receiver, and then you motion that receiver away from him, and the cornerback doesn't follow him, and he's hovering up by the line of scrimmage, that might reveal where a blitzer might be, or it might force them to change which safety is deep and which safety is up, and then change maybe where a blitz is going to come from. Like, there's a lot of different ways that defenses have to adjust to your pre-snap motion, and the Bears did a good job also of using that pre-snap motion at the snap, so that a player is still running when Caleb Williams snaps the ball, so that guys like DJ Moore and Keenan Allen would get a head start on their route. They're not running vertically. That's illegal motion, and they got flagged for that actually a couple times in this game, DJ Moore in particular. But there were plays where, like, Keenan Allen is running horizontally, so he's already moving, not at full speed, but at a jog. So he's not starting from a stop when the ball is snapped. He's already running and can then release from the line of scrimmage more quickly because that motion at least gave him a head start in one direction so that he could turn upfield and have some speed behind it instead of going from a complete stop when he's stationarily lined up there. They used pre-snap motion as well to set up a couple of screen passes as well, where the formation didn't tell you it was going to be a screen, but then all of a sudden they snap the ball right when the player's in motion, and the motion then puts him in a spot to either block or catch a screen pass on the other side where you didn't know pre-snap. There were only 2 receivers over there, so they're probably not throwing the screen. As they're motioning the third guy, they snap it, and then boom, they've been able to set up the screen pre-snap without the defense being able to key in on how the formation and the alignment of the players was going to set up that play. And it's part of why they had more success on a couple of those quick passes to DJ Moore. Player alignment is also a big part of this conversation. That, yes, the motion changes where players are lined up, but even on plays without motion, the way that Thomas Brown had this offense line up looked a little bit different. Not drastically different, but a little bit different than how Waldron was doing it, in a way that had big effects on Caleb Williams and the receivers as well, being able to create separation after the snap and find more space in the open field for Caleb Williams to get the ball to them. So we'll look at how the player alignments and also some of the ways that they synced that up with Caleb Williams' footwork helped open up this Bears offense next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by our friends at Zbiotics and their new pre-alcohol probiotic drink. It's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in your gut. And it's that byproduct, not dehydration, that's mostly to blame for your next rough day. And so the pre-alcohol drink by Zbiotics produces an enzyme that breaks this byproduct down. Just remember to make Zbiotics your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best the next day. To try it out for yourself, go to zbiotics.com/lockedonnfl to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout. Zbiotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund you, no questions asked. Just remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedonnfl and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout for 15% off. Locked On Bears is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. And FanDuel wants to jumpstart your winnings with some bonus bets added into your account. Right now, new customers, if you bet $5 and you win that $5 bet, FanDuel is going to add an extra $150 into your account that you can use to keep playing and winning on FanDuel. Their app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL as well. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. So if you want that first $5 bet to be on Bears-Vikings, the Bears are 3.5-point underdogs against the spread. The money line straight up is Bears plus 148 for the upset, and the over-under is expecting a lower scoring 39.5-point total. You win that $5 bet, you're getting $150 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Putting players in motion helped give Caleb Williams some extra answers to the test before he snapped the ball. But the way Thomas Brown chose to align players formationally also helped create more room for receivers to get open and more, I would say, bigger windows or more space for Caleb Williams to be able to get passes in there so that it's not as though he has to get into the scramble drill and becomes backyard football where you just got to open everything up and hope somebody finds some way to get open. Because what Shane Waldron had been doing was deviating from one of the staples of the Shane Waldron offense from which he came. The Sean McVay offense from which he came. We knew Waldron had coached under Sean McVay with the Rams before he took over as Seahawks offensive coordinator and then, of course, Bears offensive coordinator. And one of the things Waldron did in Seattle and continued to do in Chicago that was different from what Sean McVay has done and different from what a lot of the other Sean McVay proteges had done when they go on to coach other offenses is how wide or narrow your receivers are lined up. And when we talk about wide or narrow, we're talking about distance to the sideline versus distance to the offensive line. So when we talk about tight splits, that's when your wide receivers are lined up a lot closer to the tight ends and to the offensive line. Everyone's kind of compressed closer to the hash marks and farther away from the sidelines. Whereas more spread out, wider formations are when your receivers are closer to the sidelines, closer to numbers, and farther away from the tight ends and the offensive linemen in the middle of the field where the ball is. Sean McVay historically, currently with the Rams and with a lot of his descendants of his coaching tree, Sean McVay offenses do a lot of tighter splits to the line of scrimmage. You want your wide receivers closer, condensed up near your tight ends, because then that leaves more space to the outside to throw to there. If all the players are starting in the middle, that means there's more room for them to run their routes out, leaves more space between them and the sidelines to work towards the sideline when they break out on routes. Whereas Shane Waldron in Seattle and in Chicago as well was much more inclined to put his receivers farther and farther wider towards the sideline. And you can make the Shane Waldron side of the argument there that you say, okay, if you put your receivers wider and wider, then that means the defensive backs have to spread out more, and there's more space in the middle of the field and in the seams because there aren't other receivers bringing other defenders into some of those areas, right? It's not as though that there's only one right way to do offense in the NFL, but it is interesting that Waldron comes from the McVay tree and hasn't been operating the McVay offense in this system the same way that other guys had. Thomas Brown now takes over as offensive coordinator, and you could see the splits where the receivers lined up get a lot tighter. It's not every play, it's not every player, but generally over the course of the game, the average distance away from the hash marks with Thomas Brown was shorter from where the receivers were lined up compared to Waldron, who was one of the widest in the NFL in terms of where receivers were lining up. And this is an offense that runs a lot of out-breaking routes and it attacks the middle of the field some, but not as much there. And so if you think about it, if you're asking a player to run a route upfield, some kind of stem, and then break to the sideline, if they're already starting out close to the sideline as is, or closer to the sideline, when they break out, you have a much shorter timing window where you can throw that ball in there before the receiver's just at the sideline and then his route's over. He's got nowhere else he can go, and then he has to freelance from there. So, when you got DJ Moore or Rome Odunze on the outside, say they're kind of by the numbers, they run 5 yards up and then turn to the sideline. They only have, 7 or 8 yards to then of horizontal space before they hit the sideline, and they got no more room to run the route. So if Caleb Williams isn't perfectly precise getting it to them in that exact moment, they're only open for that brief window from when they break to the sideline before they get to the sideline for the ball to be able to get in there. But if that same receiver starts that route over by the hash marks and goes up 5 yards and then breaks to the sideline, he's got so much more space before he finally gets to the sideline. So the ball doesn't have to hit him right away, right? Caleb can look at another receiver and get to a second receiver, and if that receiver is breaking out, he's got a longer window of time where that receiver is still open, because where the receiver lined up on offense dictated how much space he would have if he's breaking to the outside. Now, not every route breaks to the outside, and you can't just run your whole offense breaking to the outside, but when you ask your quarterback to run a lot of those plays, I think that's where we'd see plays where no one would be open for Caleb, because if there's any pressure whatsoever, then that time window that you had to hit a person on an out route is gone, because it had to be perfect timing in that exact moment, or else nothing's going to show up there. But in this kind of situation, there's just more time for Caleb to get to some of those balls. And you can see the alignment splits in Rome Odunze's route tree from this game on targeted plays. We think of Odunze in this offense, number 3 receiver, more of the deep threat. You line him up on the outside and run him vertically. And they still ran him vertically at times here, but they run him vertically up the seam. He lined up a lot closer. There were about 2 targets where he was really truly an outside wider split receiver, one of which was the 4th and 2 play where Caleb Williams threw the back shoulder ball to Rome Odunze to convert that 4th down at the end of that game. It was a beautiful play. And it goes to show, not every route is going to be run from a tight split. It doesn't always have to be tight splits. But when you look at the routes that Rome Odunze did run, it's a lot of plays where you can see the window for Caleb Williams to throw has more time, because he doesn't run out of field, because he's starting more centrally located. And they had him work more crossing routes in this game as well, Rome Odunze specifically, that also, I think, gives Caleb Williams longer windows to be able to hit, so that it just doesn't have to require perfect timing, where it's okay, if you don't throw the ball at the exact 2-second mark, he's not open, so you got to find somebody else, and now no one's open, and now you're under pressure, and now you're scrambling, and now you're sacked. That was happening too often in this Chicago Bears offense. And by tightening up those splits just a little bit more, right? This is not a drastic offensive change. It's the same system. It's the same plays. You're just having your wide receiver line up 5 or 10 yards farther in than towards the sideline, and it can make that much of a difference for getting Caleb Williams open and just building in quicker options for him on these plays and trying to line it up with his footwork a little bit more, so that he's got options he can go through a progression and not have everyone's only going to be open for a split second. And if you don't get the ball out right when it needs to, then that's it. It's game over. They gave him more to work with post snap, in addition to giving him more to work with pre-snap by going to that pre-snap motion, right? You can see how these small changes then start to stack up on each other, because, Caleb Williams comes out and sends a receiver in pre-snap motion. So he's now I know what the coverage is. And that receiver's motioning to a tighter split, and he's going to work to the outside. You now know the coverage, you know what to expect, and you know that you're going to have more time to get the ball to him based on his route. You give him a better play before you snap the ball, you give him a better play after you snap the ball. And it's not even a new play. It's just a new motion before the snap. It's not a lot. That's not hard to teach somebody in a week. And it's just instead of running that route there, bump over 5 yards and then run the same route there. You don't have to teach the wide receivers a new play. You don't have to teach the quarterback a new play. It doesn't have to be a whole new everything, right? It's just like, hey, let's take that thing we were doing. It's close. It's in the right vicinity, and just squeeze it in a little bit. And then, hey, instead of just start staying there the whole play, pre-snap, start somewhere else, and then motion over, and then boom, same play, you're good to go. The same thing we've been practicing all year, to do these one or two little tweaks, and that can open up so much more for this Bears offense. And it also makes the offensive line's job a little bit easier when you make the quarterback's job a little bit easier. And I think it helped this group in particular have their best, maybe not their best game, but given the injuries they still had up front, the offensive line played better than I think we would have expected against the Packers. And I want to take the next step and like marry what we've been talking about here with how that helps the offensive line in a group that still has some injury question marks moving forward. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Bilt Rewards. If you're a renter like me, you really don't like seeing that rent check come out of your bank account every single month. But it's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Bilt Rewards comes in. Because Bilt is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent payments every month. You just pay your rent and you watch the Bilt points roll in, and then you can use those Bilt points to jet off on a dream vacation. You could put your point towards a flight or a hotel stay. You could also use your points to book fitness studio classes, you can also redeem them towards a future rent payment as well. They're designed to meet your lifestyle. Earn points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbilt.com/lockedonnfl. That's joinbilt, JOINBILT, joinbilt.com/lockedonnfl. Make sure you use our URL so they know we sent you. joinbilt.com/lockedonnfl to start earning points with your rent payments today. Part of unlocking this Chicago Bears offense for Caleb Williams and making his job easier also ends up making the offensive line's job a little bit easier. And this all kind of goes hand in hand. It's a little bit symbiotic in a sort of a chicken and an egg relationship where it's like, okay, does giving Caleb Williams pre-snap motion, tighter splits, and some quicker passing options make the offensive line better, or does making the offensive line better by giving them more support in some of these ways then help Caleb Williams be better? And I think it's definitely a little bit of both here, because, okay, when you've got players lining up on tighter splits, those condensed wide receiver formations, they get in the way of pass rushers a little bit. You're not asking Rome Odunze to actually, block Rashawn Gary or Lucas Van Ness or whoever's coming off the edge for the Green Bay Packers, but there's a big difference between that pass rusher having all sorts of space right outside him. It's just the offensive tackle, and then the bunch of space where he can really take off upfield and go as wide as he wants, trying to open up the tackle and then cut across his face or whatever you're going to do, versus there's a wide receiver right there who's just going to be kind of in your way. He's not even going to stop and chip and block you per se, but he's just going to disrupt the path you want to run in. So it keeps pass rushers on the edge from getting as wide as they might want to, because the wide receivers are right up in those same kind of tight splits. You also saw Cole Kmet played the highest percentage of snaps of any game he's been in this season. It wasn't quite 100%. I don't know if the math rounded to 98 or 99% of the snaps, but the Bears offense was on the field for 72 plays. Cole Kmet was on the field for 70 plays. All but 2 snaps was Cole Kmet on the field. DJ Moore was 68, Keenan Allen was 66, Rome Odunze was 59. But Cole Kmet was out there the vast majority of the time. There were a lot of plays where he's chipping before he's releasing. They were able to use him not as a purely a pass protector all the time or anything, but like he helped out there quite a bit. Roschon Johnson helped out in pass protection quite a bit. And same kind of thing, when Cole Kmet's at tight end, it changes the pass rush angle. Even if he's not staying in the block, it changes the pass rush angle for some of those outside edge rushers there. And then I think as a result, you give the offensive line that kind of support where it's not just us 5 against their 4, and when they blitz us, we got no answers here and we're trying to pass stuff off. Like, they've got extra help up front. And I think that helps this offensive line play better. You look at Caleb Williams' time to throw against the blitz in this game was faster than his time to throw on plays when he wasn't blitzed. When extra pass rushers was coming, the answer was get rid of the ball more quickly. It's been ingrained now in Caleb Williams' head, I think, from Thomas Brown saying, hey, we don't know how well our offensive line is going to be able to hold up. So when you see that blitz coming, you know it's coming, we got to get the ball to somebody quickly so that the offensive line isn't giving up sacks. And overall, over the course of the game, you saw the Bears do a lot fewer plays where it's just your 5 guys are dropping back to block and they've got to block the pass rushers coming at them. Like a lot fewer normal, traditional drop back passing plays as a percentage of the total passing plays. Still, like the majority of the time, you got to ask your offensive line to just block. I mean, they got to just be able to do their jobs. You can't spend a whole game plan hiding them. But when you think about ways that a play caller can hide or mask or support his offensive line in some different ways, Thomas Brown was doing more of that. You know, when you think about play action and rollouts, there were more play action and rollouts in this game than in a lot of previous games that Shane Waldron had been calling as an offense. And so when you've got play action, it changes how the pass rush is coming after you. It changes how defenses are going to respond. It helps your offensive line stay ahead because the offensive line knows it's a passing play. The defense is still trying to figure out, is this a run or a pass? So it slows down that pass rush. The Bears ran plenty of screen passes, got more involved in the screen game. Again, you're not asking your offensive lineman to do a traditional drop back pass blocking set in a screen play because they know you're going to let the guy go and go out and block a screen. Or if you're blocking the backside, you don't really have to block them all that long. It's not a traditional ask of your offensive line. And so when you add together the number of screens the Bears ran, the number of play action plays and rollouts the Bears ran, like as a percentage of the total offense, there were just a lot fewer plays where it was just a straight drop back. I mean, it was still about half. I mean, a little less than half of your plays were screens and play action and rollout and stuff that kind of changes the responsibility of the offensive line, but it just gives them a break, right? It gives them a breather sometimes to say, okay, it's not just me going one-on-one with Kenny Clark for 70 plays over and over, where just every play, it's just me and him, traditional straight drop back pass. Like you can get one over on him and you can make him have to slow down and make the defense have to think, oh wait, is this a screen pass? Oh wait, is this a screen pass? No, okay, there's just, they can't just pin their ears back and say every play we're rushing the passer, we're gonna go get him because we can't, because we can just let loose and know that they have to do traditional passing plays. So between the success of DeAndre Swift running the ball, the success of some of the screen plays, the success of some of the play action plays, it made the offensive line's job in pass protection a little bit easier. So that someone like Jake Curhan can come in at left guard for the injured Tevin Jenkins and in place of the injured Ryan Bates and be your third string left guard. And he was fine. Not a Pro Bowl player or anything, coming off the bench being your third string guy, but not a giant gaping vulnerability there, at least in this game. I thought Coleman Shelton did a pretty decent job in pass protection as well. I mean, it felt like more of the pressure was coming from the edge, which maybe is where a little bit more of the strength of the Packers pass rush is anyway, but still, Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright didn't feel 100% healthy to me either, and you still have some questions about how this offensive line is going to look next week against the Minnesota Vikings, because it depends. Is Tevin Jenkins healthy and ready to go? Yes or no? Is Ryan Bates healthy and ready to go? Yes or no? And then, okay, depending on that, do you put Jake Curhan and then start him at left guard, or do you consider playing Larry Borum at left guard? Well, maybe it depends on if Karana Magaji is healthy, because Curhan's kind of your backup guard and can also play backup tackle, and Doug Kramer is probably still in that mix somewhere, but they clearly preferred Curhan over Kramer and Borum in the middle of a game against the Green Bay Packers, but maybe with a week to prepare. I mean, it's probably going to be left guard Jake Curhan, and then you go Braxton Jones, Curhan, Shelton, Pryor, right? But you never know with these injuries week in and week out. You could hope for Tevin Jenkins or Ryan Bates getting back. You hope that no one else pops up on the injury report. If you hope Braxton Jones or Darnell Wright didn't wake up sore today or this week and realize, okay, I'm still not quite over that injury, but was able to play through the game, but still not going to be 100%. You just kind of hope you can get something closer to a healthier, cohesive offensive line unit so you can have the same lineup from week to week. And maybe even just start a game and finish a game with the same 5 players would be like a cool baby step for this team, because it seems like every week somebody on the offensive line leaves with another injury. You can be sure that if we get offensive line health updates throughout the week or any other big injury news, we'll break it down for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to the podcast, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast, breaking down the league as a whole. I was the co-host on this morning's edition of Locked On NFL with Tyler Rowland. We talked about Caleb Williams in the Offensive Rookie of the Year race with Jaden Daniels and now Bo Nix emerging in that contest. We talked about Daniel Jones being benched in New York. We talked about Anthony Richardson coming back off the bench for the Colts. And we talked a little bit about the kind of blowout Monday Night Football game between the Texans and the Cowboys that the game itself wasn't really all that entertaining, but lots of good NFL coverage for you there on Locked On NFL, because that podcast comes out twice a day. In the morning, you get Tyler Rowland. In the afternoon, you get Tony Wiggins, and I do every Tuesday morning with Tyler. So go check out today's Locked On NFL for your second listen. Come back tomorrow and make Locked On Bears your first listen once again for another opportunity to bear down.